From tracking cabs to clouds, have you thought about how location data has become an integral part of our everyday lives? If you're interested in knowing the science of location better, our Introduction to Geospatial Science and Technology course is the perfect starting point for you. Designed for curious minds from all disciplines, perfect for newcomers and working professionals, this course unpacks the science and real-world applications behind geospatial technology. Don't miss the chance to learn from the best in the field. Applications closing on 7 June.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
After a lull of many years, there's so much happening in India's nuclear energy sector this year. On 1st February 2025, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented the first full budget of Modi government 3.0. But she made a major policy announcement related to nuclear energy, apart from other things that she spoke about. There were three components to her announcement on nuclear energy. First, an intention to amend the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010 and the Atomic Energy Act of 1962 to foster more involvement of the private sector in India's nuclear industry. Second, there was an announcement of a nuclear energy mission for research and development of small modular reactors with an outlay of about 20,000 crores. Third, there was an announcement or rather a target set to generate about 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047, and this was ostensibly to aid India's energy transition efforts. The most significant of these announcements, however, was the intention to amend the liability law, which we also call CLNDA in short. But what is this law about? Why is it being amended? Would this amendment serve as a silver bullet for the Indian nuclear industry that has been stagnating for a long time now? Hi, I'm Lokendra Sharma, a research analyst with the High-Tech Geopolitics program at the Takshashila Institution in Bengaluru. To discuss the various facets of nuclear liability, I have with me two very special guests today, Parthasarathy and Siddharth. Both of them have just finished Takshashila's graduate certificate in public policy course, and as part of this course, they had examined nuclear liability in detail and also made some recommendations on how the liability law can be revised and what purpose would that serve. In their other lives, apart from the course, Siddharth is a political consultant and Partha is an engineer who works in the renewable sector. So with that, let's get started, Siddharth and Partha. So for the understanding of our listeners, right, what exactly has been the problem in the liability law of 2010? Which sections in particular has caused issues to the private sector? Any one of you can maybe initiate that?
With respect to the CLNDA, right?
Yes.
If you are asking like what are the challenges which is creating challenges for the private sector, there are mainly two sections. One of them is section 17, which talks about right to recourse. That is the operators, right, who run the nuclear facilities. These operators are generally identified by the government, or they are actually a part of the government, or it is a government entity. So now these people are actually they will operate the nuclear facility or the reactors. Now they have a right to recourse. Now what does this mean? That the operator will buy the technology or will be supplied with the technology or any other component, right, from a supplier, which is actually a private agent. Now, the right to recourse section says that if in case of a nuclear damage, anything wrong happens in the nuclear reactor, right, the operator has a recourse option. Like he can go back and sue the supplier. So which is a problematic section, which is preventing the private players who are mostly people outside, like suppliers from outside India, right? The suppliers are not coming to India to invest and bring in their technology because of this right to recourse option, which the operators have. In this case, the operators are the government. So there is a fear that the government will be overbearing in whatever they are trying to do. So that is one of the problematic sections.
So the other problematic section is the section 46, which opens up to other tort laws which can be applied against the suppliers, right? This is kind of bringing in ambiguity for all international suppliers to supply to India. Also, to add to context of the CLNDA, right? In 2008, around 2008, Indo-US signed the nuclear deal, right? And after this, since India is not a signatory of the NPT, we expected a lot more to come in terms of nuclear technology into India. And to enable this, the Nuclear Liability Act was was one of the key factors to enable this. And in this respect, this act was brought in. But India has also seen the Bhopal gas tragedy. India has had a very tragic past with such damages that has happened. And with this in mind, the then opposition and the left parties and a lot of civic groups pressurized the government to insert the two sections, and specifically the section 17B, to ensure that those who are supplying don't have a free hand to get away and are still liable to any sort of damages that happens in case it happens, right? So that being the case, this was inserted, and somehow this has kind of constrained India's nuclear trajectory to a large extent.
So just for the clarity of our listeners, right? The section 17B that Siddharth just referred to says, and I quote, the nuclear incident has resulted as a consequence of an act of supplier or his employee, which includes supply of equipment or material with patent or latent defects or substandard services, unquote. So basically, an operator of a nuclear reactor, which as Partha identified is mostly the government of India via mostly the NPCIL, right? That operates nuclear power reactors in India. They have a right to recourse. They can essentially go back to their suppliers and say, this accident happened because of a defective component that is supplied, and I need you to compensate me for the damage I have suffered, right? So the operator is compensating the victims from a nuclear accident. And in turn, if the operator believes that the accident was because of a problem that the supplier did, they can go back to the supplier. So this is the basic, right?
Yeah.
What is section 46 about?
Section 46 specifically says that the act to be in addition to any other law, right? So what this says is, while largely internationally the only liability act would be enforced upon the operators, this one specific the way in which it is worded brings in ambiguity that the supplier or any operator, if not the government, could be liable to other sort of laws that can enforce them, and other legal hurdles that would come in terms of nuclear damages that can happen. So this enables a lot of other tort laws that can be applied on the suppliers.
To add to that, like it is like the individuals, any other individual or the state, right?
Yeah.
They can file civil or even criminal cases against the supplier.
But this particular section, right, doesn't mention supplier at all. What it says is that the provision, and I quote again, right? Quote, the provisions of this act shall be in addition to and not in derogation of any other law for the time being in force, and nothing contained herein shall exempt the operator from any proceeding which might, apart from this act, be instituted against the operator. So, Siddharth, you are right that other laws can apply, but Partha, this one only mentions the operator. So, what is the issue here, really?
See, it says the operator can get sued in section 46, but again, going back to section 17, the operator can again sue, bring the, what you say, like the take upon the issue on the supplier.
Okay.
So it can again become a supplier's issue. Saying,
I think the main problem that is happening here is, even though section 46 doesn't mention suppliers, right, it also doesn't explicitly exclude suppliers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's including operators, but it's not excluding suppliers. And given the experience that private sector has had with Indian laws, right, which are in a flux, right, and sometimes things are even applied retrospectively, right. So when there is low confidence in the credibility of laws, right, or on the stability of laws, right, or how the laws would be applied, in those cases, I think what the private sector suppliers are looking for is a assurance, a legally backed assurance that suppliers would be kept out of the purview of the Section 46 in its entirety, right? Okay. Now, since you've understood both Section 17 and Section 46, these are the two primary issues, right? And both of you have examined these in detail in your in the assignments that you did for the GCPP course. And I think both of you have taken slightly divergent positions. Partha, you have argued that the Section 17 in its entirety should be removed. So the right to recourse is gone. And Siddharth, you have just argued for Section 17's subsection B to go away. Rest of it can stay. Now, my sense is that the CSC, the convention on the main international convention that we have on nuclear liability, right, to which all countries try to align with, right? The convention on supplementary compensation. What is it called fully?
It is called the
Yeah, convention on supplementary compensation from nuclear damage. Yes, CSC
Yes.
in short, correct? So countries try to align their laws with the CSC. That's a global thing. So in CSC, there are parallels with Section 17A and Section 17C in the Article 10 of the CSC. Section 17B is not there as such in the CSC. So private sector and critiques of the liability law have questioned this lack of alignment between a global one
Yes.
and an Indian law. What Indians have tried to Indian government has tried to clarify is that Section 17B should not be looked at as if aberration, because usually such things are part of contracts normally. Correct. Right? And CSC as well as Section 17A talk about contract.
Yeah,
right?
and even 17A talks about contractual liability.
Yeah,
as well.
17A talks about contractual thing, and CSC talks about contractual thing. So they're saying that it's just flowing out of the contract. It's
Correct.
generally part of contract. So this is the groundwork on this, right? Now I'll give opportunity to both of you to one by one explain what position you took on liability law and why. What was your rationale, right? Why did you argue what you argue in the recommendations that you made? So maybe Partha, you go first.
Yeah. See, what I feel is I have tried to look at what is actually the government trying to do with the CLNDA. Which I feel is like there is a lot of things that the government is trying to do. Most of it is being done by the government itself, right from the idea of identifying the operator or even publicizing a nuclear damage which has happened and then running a new like the operating the plant and other things, right? Now there are too many things that the government is actually doing. Now when there is so much of overbearing of the government trying to do so many things, this thing, right, the confidence and the transparency is not there. Now since the operator is also a government identified entity, right, the idea of like nuclear facilities being operated by private people are also not there. Like it is not there. It is a in a way like the market is concentrated there.
Yeah.
Now these are all like risk factors. Now on top of this, if you have the right to recourse option also, right, now what can happen is, which I think has happened also, there are not many suppliers who are coming ahead to actually take part in the actual activity of supplying technology to India and other things, which are not actually happening. So it is for this reason which I felt that the right to recourse should be completely removed, and there should be much more responsibility on the operator per se. And also I have also argued saying that the operator need not be only NPCIL. There should be market should be open wherein you have private people who are taking part as operators running the plants, which increases the responsibility on the operator to
hold your thought there, right? Let's say tomorrow a Bhopal kind level of accident were to take place in the nuclear industry, hypothetically, hopefully it doesn't happen, right? So let's say you have a nuclear reactor and there's a reactor meltdown, and then there is a radiation leak in the surrounding areas, and you're looking at potentially billions of dollars in just cleaning up the mess. And we've seen what happened in Fukushima, right? It has taken billions of dollars every year for Japan to clean up the mess. It's been almost like 14 years,
13, 14 years.
14 years, right? It's still bleeding them with billions, right? You have to pay all the victims. You have to ring fence and the area around which it's contaminated, and also sort of shield the contamination source, the radiation source, right? So it's a lot of cost involved. Let's say operator was spotless. Operator didn't do any fault, right? Operator, private or government, was doing their job very nicely. They were not at fault. But it was because of some pressure vessel or some faulty equipment, right? Not a major one, a small faulty equipment that led to a cascading failure in the nuclear reactor. In that case, why should operator, Partha, take all the brunt of that accident?
See, how if can the operator prove that the accident has actually occurred due to a faulty equipment?
If they can, then
If they can, maybe then maybe they can sue the operator. But that this right to recourse option as an option itself should not be available for the operator is what I have argued upon, saying that if that is there, then maybe it will also bring about some kind of what do you say, like
blame shifting.
blame shifting is one thing, and then I think the operators will not be so much serious about what they're actually doing,
Okay.
which can lead to even more accidents, because they always have an option saying that okay, it happened due to the supplier. So that is one thing which I see, which will prevent suppliers from actually coming to you, which is actually happening now, right? So that is what I feel.
Okay. Siddharth?
Yeah, coming to my approach on what how I have told that we should, kind of amend this CLNDA or whatever recommendation that I have given. I've taken a fourfold approach to this, right? So basically, the one that is the current, what do you say, the way India has not been able to match up to its trajectory, what it planned out in its nuclear energy sector, is because of section 17B, where there's supplier liability. So we have to repeal this section 17B altogether and remove it out of the law. Then the second thing is, as we discussed earlier, section 46 is giving rise to tort ambiguity, where suppliers can be pursued under other civil or criminal laws. So it should be worded in a better manner to ensure that the supplier is not covered under other criminal or civil laws, and there should be more clarity with regards to who the section 46 applies to, right? And the two other aspects where I've said is, see, now you're reducing the liability on suppliers, so you also have to build some trust with the public, right? So the CLNDA establishes a claims tribunal where people who are affected can go and put forth their claims, and then the tribunal will give the final judgment, right? This tribunal is temporary in nature, right? The government appoints a tribunal only after a damage is created, right? So to enhance public trust, we should come up with a permanent tribunal, right? So that the public trust will generally, enhance when there's some appointed authority who's in charge of all of this, right? And there's another thing, that operator liability with respect to the CLNDA is capped at 500 crores, right? This was done in 2010. So 500 crores in 2010 means it's valued at around 1,200 crores today, right? So it's
Which one are you talking about? Sorry,
the operator liability is pegged at 500 crores.
No, it's 1,500.
It got changed.
Yeah,
currently it's 1,500.
1,500
Yeah.
crores. But then again, this is value with respect to 2010, right? And there's so much inflation, there's so many things that have changed by now, that this 1,500 crores might not be sufficient to ensure that all the claims have been settled. And
Okay, let me clarify it for listeners here, right? On the quantum of liability. So the primarily responsibility in CLNDA is on the operator, and their liability is capped at 1,500 crores. But what happens if the liability goes beyond 1,500 crores, right? In that case, what happens is the Indian government will address the gap between 1,500 crore and 300 million SDRs,
Yes,
like
yes.
special drawing rights. So that should be roughly equivalent to, I think, 3,000 to 4,000 crores, right?
Definitely.
So that is the gap that the government of India will bridge
Correct.
themselves, right? But since the operator is government and government is government, right? So it's
Correct.
essentially, let's say, 3 to 4,000 crores, the government is there. Beyond 3 million SDR, the government should be able to access international funds under the CSC. So that is how it looks like right now. What you're saying, Siddharth, is that the quantum of money, 1,500 crores, is too less.
Too less, it's outdated. It was fixed in 2010 and we are in 2025.
Yeah.
And if you look at the inflation and whatever has happened, it's
Even
an outdated figure.
I would even go one step beyond. I would say, even for the times that this figure had been instituted, right, it was woefully less.
Definitely.
For the simple reason that when Fukushima happened, that made clear, that was in early 2010s, right? In 2011, it costed billions of dollars.
Correct.
Right? 1,500 crores is peanuts.
Yes.
It's nothing. Right? It would be maybe enough for a very small radiation leak somewhere, right? Or maybe an accident at a nuclear facility that doesn't house a reactor per se, but maybe spent fuel reprocessing or waste storage and so on. An ancillary nuclear facility, not the main reactor.
Yes.
But this is peanuts, right?
Yes.
This doesn't cover anything. So what you're saying is it needs to be hiked.
Yeah, rather than hiking, see, now if we amend the CLNDA in 2025 and set maybe say 10,000 crores,
Yeah.
going forward 20 years later, 10,000 crores might again mean peanuts, right? So we have to, benchmark this with the global standard of special drawing rights, and we have to set a few thousand SDRs or million SDRs, and the operator should ensure that whatever liability is there is, indexed with the SDR, so that SDR is calculated based on a lot of factors. So we ensure that the compensation or the pool of money that's there for compensation is always evolving and is not something stuck in the past.
Okay, so what you're saying is it has to be benchmarked, it has to be linked with something, so that while it is dynamic,
Yes.
Suppliers and operators also have confidence in what it is linked with. Correct. And the rate at which it will rise.
Yeah, right? IMF generally sets the SDR, so it's a global standard.
Okay. So, Partha, what are your views on Siddhartha's position?
Yeah, about the section 46, I concur with him, saying that allowing section 46 to be open, saying any other law can be also applied is a bit of a problem. So that requires some kind of changes. And then section 17, like the quantum of the liability, right? So that is also, it needs to change. One thing, though, that 1,500 on the operator and 300 million SDRs on the gap which the government will fill is, again, it is little less, considering the examples that you have also given, right? Like it requires a lot of money to actually retain nuclear damage and other things, right? So that kind of the indexing it with because India has again ratified the CSC, right? India has ratified the CSC, but because of the supplier clause, the recourse causes there.
I'll tell you contradiction here,
Yeah.
Partha and Siddharth, right? So you have both argued to some extent that suppliers have faced issues because of Section 17. The liability cap under Section 17 is 1,500 crores, right? And I'm largely in alignment with you both on Section 46, that it needs to be seriously clarified there what it is, right? Don't open the floodgates, right? But here on Section 17, let me highlight a contradiction, right? So on one end, you're saying 1,500 crores is too less. It's peanuts, right? And on the other hand, you are also saying suppliers got, bothered about right to recourse, right? But the right to recourse caps it at 1,500 crores. So an operator, even if they were to enforce the contract that they had with the suppliers, maximum that they can take out from the supplier is 1,500 crores. And let me also highlight that India has instituted a nuclear insurance fund right now,
Yes.
right? And that can also to some extent cover both operators and suppliers. So already we are talking about a very peanut amount. The 1,500 crore amount for a major Western supplier
Is
is
not.
not a big deal. It's in some millions of dollars, right? It's not a big deal. It's not even in billions. And uh, you also have insurance covering for you, right? So, should we really be thinking this is the primary issue because of which Western suppliers are not coming in, right? What I've often wondered is the liability law an easy scapegoat to blame for the stagnation that Indian nuclear industry is suffering from, or there are larger reasons behind the stagnation, right?
Definitely, there are larger reasons. Okay,
Okay.
in the sense like, but it is not to be claimed that only the CLNDA is the only reason for the
Sure.
this thing
But
not happening.
isn't it portrayed in media? You do any search, right? The biggest culprit that comes, why the nuclear deal with the US couldn't take off after 2008, why there are no Western reactors in India, why India's nuclear industry is stagnating. The first mention you'll find is nuclear
Yeah,
liability law.
so it is not the only reason according to me. So there are many other reasons because of the cost involved to set up a
Yeah.
nuclear reactor, and then the time involved in it,
Hmm.
and most importantly the fuel. Like,
Hmm.
what do you do with the fuel post your usage?
Hmm.
So these are some of the issues that are there in the for the nuclear this thing to take up. Now what I feel is, again, why are these things there? These things are there because of the government's do it all approach, right? Like, they're trying to do many things. Again, I come back to the same point, saying, why do you want the operator to be only a government appointed entity?
Yeah.
Now how do you bring the cost down? How do you bring in efficiency in
Sure.
what you're doing? One way is to open it up a little bit to the market, like get in private participation.
What is the lowest hanging fruit to get private operators in? Captive nuclear plants, right?
Mm.
Let's say you were to establish, you are an industrialist, right? And you establish this mega steel plant or mega data center somewhere in UP or somewhere in Maharashtra, and you need reliable, low cost energy, and coming from a generation source that only supplies to you and no one else, right? These are captive plants. So you go to the government and say, you may lay out a case, see, we need it for us, and we can run a nuclear small modular reactor, let's say,
Yes.
about 300 megawatts or less, exclusively for us, run by us. You be the regulator, right? You have the AERB, Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. You have a host of accountability institutions in your nuclear establishment. Keep your checks to the stringent. Verify that we have triple redundancies in whatever systems we built and deploy. We have all the active and passive safety features. Everything is right there. Monitor all you want, but we will run it, we will build it, we will operate it. Right? You make the case for captive. I think that is a low hanging fruit they can start with.
But even for this, right, the again going back to your previous question of whether CLNDA is the primary deterrent in this effort, I think even for captive nuclear power plants, SMRs, which are small modular reactors, are to be installed, and India today does not have the technology.
No, it does.
No, they're still in prototyping, and it has to import SMRs. We are going with PHWRs right now, and
Yeah,
a
so-
size down compact version is still being
Yeah.
thought of, right?
Yeah.
So in all these cases, we do have to import some sort of technology.
Yeah.
And today, India does not have one corporate entity that can come up with an entire reactor, right? They're only vendors or subsystem suppliers
Yeah.
today, right?
Yeah.
So again, repealing Section 17B will be the gateway of, opening up this space, but it's not the only deterrent. So this will be the first step of ensuring people participate.
Few issues, right? Even if you repeal Section 17B, then you have Section 17A, right? That about a contractual thing, right?
Yeah, but that again aligns with the global standards.
That aligns,
Yes.
right? So still, let's say you were the operator, you can still insert certain things in the contract.
Yeah, but then it's known, right? There's no ambiguity. Section 17B, there's a lot of ambiguity that you never know when the operator
So,
can go behind the supplier.
Are
But
you talking about the patent and latent defects?
yes,
That phrase?
yes, the patent and latent defect. But when it's contractual, both the sides know of when a certain entity will be held liable, right? So there is more clarity with respect to Section 17A and not with respect to Section 17B.
Okay. So, some more clarificatory points, right? There have been historical accidents that have been due to supplier's fault. That has been documented. That is established, right? So, doing away completely with supplier liability may simply be imprudent, because there may be actual cases of suppliers being responsible. But what you are saying is modifying the language of Section 17B then?
No, even Section 17C also talks about some sort of liability on the supplier, right? Currently, where
Not supplier as such.
yeah, but right to recourse going back to the
Yeah, so
supplier
if-
or whatever. And even A is there, which is contractual in nature. So I think we should move ahead and align ourselves with global standards, because
Okay.
anywhere the damage happens, whether be it US or France, the same clauses are there. And I think it is quite holistic in nature to ensure that suppliers are held accountable where they have to be.
Partha, any views on this?
Yeah. So if the operator can establish saying that the effect the damage is actually because of a problematic component which the supplier or the technology that the supplier has given, which I think boils down to 17A, the first part of the section, right? And it is part of the contract. Maybe it can be, there should be an option that the supplier is not let completely free. Yeah, so that is what I feel. Yeah, it can be that way.
Okay, so let's come to the silver bullet argument, right? The portrayal of nuclear liability as the only problem with the industry and so on. So we know the state of India's nuclear industry. It has stagnated for a few decades. We have only about 25 operational reactors.
Yes.
Some of them go back to 1960s or
60s.
70s, right? Some of the oldest one, I think the boiling water reactors at
In
Tarapur.
Rajasthan.
No, the Tarapur.
Tarapur. Yeah.
And those are boiling water. In Rajasthan,
It is again
we have
PHWR.
PHWRs, right? Which
Right.
we initially built with Canada's support, and later we indigenized.
Yes.
Now my contention is this: we have recently a 700 megawatt reactor, PHWR, has gone critical in Rajasthan. It's a great milestone for the industry, although it has been quite delayed, this project, right? But what we have demonstrated, what India has demonstrated, is that it can build PHWRs from anywhere between 200 megawatts to 700 megawatts.
Yeah.
That is a range it can easily build. It is possible they can even scale it to 1000 megawatts. And in a PHWR, pressurized heavy water reactor, it runs on heavy water as a moderator and as a coolant. And that is why it doesn't need enriched uranium. It needs only natural uranium. So you don't need to enrich, you are skipping that whole step, right?
Correct.
And you can also reprocess the spent fuel and obtain plutonium 239 out of it and use it in your second stage. So that is the logic of second stage that involves prototype fast breeder reactors. So that is the logic of building PHWRs. Since we are already doing good enough on pressurized heavy water reactors, why go out and seek all these Western companies who are anyway struggling in their own markets? If you look at what is happening in US, it's not as if there's a boom in the nuclear industry in the US. Some of the Western nuclear companies are also struggling, right? Westinghouse is a classic case. So rather than seeking them out and blaming everything on them not coming, yes, it's great to have a diverse reactor pool. It's great to have foreign investment coming into this, foreign technology flowing, but you have a tried and tested technology, PHWR. Double down on that. No one's stopping you from expanding your nuclear industry. You have the NSG waiver since 2008. So you can trade in nuclear fuel with other countries. Build PHWR here and get fuel from abundant. We don't have that much uranium, so get it from wherever we can. Have bilateral deals. So that's why I'm saying, is it? We also have some Russian reactors operating here.
Yeah.
We have the VVERs. I think
VVERs.
it's in
Tamil Nadu.
Kudankulam, right? So yes, get Russian, French, US or other reactors, right? But still, you have a proven technology at home. What's preventing you from building it faster and at scale and involving private sector more in Indian private sector companies that are in a position to do more on this front, right?
Yeah, so that is the point, right? Like when I am saying like it is the private sector has to get involved, it need not be only the foreign suppliers.
Yeah.
What is happening to the local talent or the local technology which we have? So it should be made much more easier for those private players within India to take part. I don't think there is any
There's no full-fledged,
business house in
yeah.
India which will tell that even though they may have the capacity, they're not ready to even to do the captive plant that you are claiming that you
Yeah,
have.
they may not do the entire thing on their own. They may do components.
Components
There
or
are only
components.
subsystem vendors.
Yeah, they are not doing it. I think, see, basically, according to me, what needs to change is, one is that there is a lot of fear about the use of nuclear energy itself. I think that has to be also be managed in a way that okay, see, it is useful. India needs it, and nowhere are we claiming that 100% of our energy mix will be from nuclear energy. It is a specific part of it which will come from nuclear energy, which is needed for us to meet other kind of requirements like access to energy, which is very important, and other things, which this can be one of the solutions. So to do that, why is it so that kind of messaging should go out, and then get the private players within the country also to take part, because we don't want any private player to be blamed for any specific wrongdoings which happen. Like, so that is how the industry in itself should, the local industry in itself should be strengthened more. So I think that can lead to much more solutions.
Siddharth?
A slightly contrasting take on this, right? So we have been indigenously building PHWRs for quite some time now, but still nuclear energy is only around 3.5% of India's entire energy mix.
It's
right?
less than 9 gigawatts right now.
Yeah, it's at around 7.5 to 8.
8.7 roughly.
Yeah,
8.7, yeah.
So we have not been able to scale it up to the extent we desired, right? When Indo-US deal happened, why was it looked upon, and why did everyone, say that this could be a game changer in India's energy trajectory, right? So, and energy demands are rising day by day. We are the third highest consumer of energy globally, and we are the most populous country. So our energy demands are generally high, right? So we have to have the latest cutting edge technology in nuclear power as well. We are dependent on PHWR generation 2 reactors when the world has marched way ahead. They have SMRs. We still don't have one single SMR in India. We don't have
I think we are trying to build a SMR version of PHWR.
Yeah, we are just making it more compact.
Calling
but
it
is
Bharat SMR, right?
No, the Bharat SR something is
Bharat
a
SMR.
compact one.
Yeah.
They are trying to come up with small modular reactor as well, and we don't have fast breed reactors also.
Yeah.
We are still prototyping it. So India is largely dependent on its own government arms to develop this BARC.
Okay, I'll tell you one thing, Siddharth. Let's say hypothetically we have done away with liability, right? And Western companies are all excited about India. They will still take a long time to develop projects in India. There are multiple reasons for that. First is siting a nuclear power plant in India, right? You need a geologically stable location, right? So you need to account for earthquakes. So you find the most geologically stable sites. That too, slightly away from population centers, because you want to also take care of risks, nuclear risks, right? And then you have the NIMBY movement, right? Not in my backyard. And that takes, so you have a lot of litigations going on, protests going on. So you have to address that. So finally, once you have a site and then you start building, this whole reactor building thing, even if you have technologies, even if you have all foreign suppliers coming in, right? It has to be built here in the Indian ecosystem.
Yes.
And that has delays.
Yes.
Like what has happened with the Russian reactors, right? Even they took a long time to get around, right? And I think that process is still going on to some extent.
I guess 2 units are still under.
Now, I'm not very sure how many, but that process is still going on. So even if Western suppliers come, they'll still be stuck in the Indian reality, right? And they'll still take time. So it will not be the silver bullet we are hoping.
Yeah, it's definitely not the silver bullet, but at least, for example, the Kovada nuclear power plant in Andhra Pradesh or the Jaitapur in Maharashtra, we have spotted the locations, and yet the project is not taking off, right? It's almost been 10 years, more than 10 years since we have been trying to bring some foreign technology there, some foreign player there to set up, right? At least in places where we have the location figured out, certain things figured out, things can become faster. And also PSUs in India have a limited capacity in which they can work, and bringing in foreign players or other private players, as Partha said, will definitely make the process of setting things up much faster.
Partha, any views on this?
Yeah, so as I've already told, right, like there should be a local private industry in India also, which caters not only to the Indian market
But global market
also. So I think that shift needs to happen. But as you have told, like it requires time, it requires a lot of resources. Now, if we get into the captive kind of a market, right, maybe the time required, and also many people start doing it, right, that might have some answers to the kind of time required and resources required may come down, because many people do it. But then again, the regulation from the government side, the government should focus on regulation, is what I feel more important. Is the government should focus more on the regulation part of it by opening it up to at least some part of it to the private players.
The sense that I get out of this discussion, and fantastic discussion we have had, Parth and Siddharth, is that first there needs to be greater private sector involvement in India's nuclear industry, whether that private company is Western or Indian. Doesn't matter. They have to be more involved, right? And Indian companies especially should cater to the global market, not just locally. That is the impression, right? Second is that the government of India should consider to break away the monopoly over a nuclear operator.
Yes.
Right? And open it up for private sector. And one low hanging fruit or easy thing to start with is captive nuclear plant. I think that is something they can consider. And next, on the liability part, I think there is a sense that it's not the magic or silver bullet, but it's still an impediment. And it needs to be streamlined. I think streamlined is the word we're looking for, right? What needs to be done is to credibly assure suppliers that if they do business in India, if they do business with operators here, they wouldn't be taken advantage of. They wouldn't be, sued under all kinds of laws. So clarifying and credibly assuring, if amendments are needed through amendments, legal amendments, or otherwise, credibly assuring suppliers that Section 46 wouldn't be misused against them. And on the liability part, I think that is where there's some divergence in the views we have, right? My sense is historically suppliers have been responsible. So there's an historical precedent to that in nuclear accident. We shouldn't be completely doing away with right to recourse. 1,500 crores is not anyway a significant amount, that too partially covered by the insurance that we instituted. So the liability amount per se, I think, is not the primary problem as much as Section 46 is. That is my view. But I also hear you that, even how the Section 17B is worded, right, that may cause a lot of worry. And how it can be just left to contractual part. So Siddharth, I understand that. And I also hear you, Partha, when you talk about completely doing away with right to recourse, because you think it is a big impediment in downing private sector's confidence in jumping into this field. So I hear both of you. I think this is where we slightly diverge as well, and that is all right. So thank you so much, both of you, for agreeing to do this episode of All Things Policy. And I hope, listeners, this discussion on nuclear liability was useful. If you have any questions, or if you disagree with all three of us, please feel free to write to us, reach out to us at Takshashila, and we would be happy to engage with you. Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.